Greet you all students of MA Final. This is paper 4th unit C, and just in continuation, yesterday we were discussing the last line of first stanza, and entire poem can be very well comprehended through these two important phrases. Now, what are these phrases? The moral proved. This is the concluding line and concluding couplet rather of first stanza. Moral proved and spirit moved. This was exactly the poet expects. Now the aspiration of a person, of a man of letters, of an artist who wishes to write poem, who is intensely interested in creative writing, really waiting for this moment. And this is the reward, yes, that when the poet has inner urge to express herself and himself. So this is not an imposition, as in the beginning he has highlighted this point, that see the integration between these two aspects. Now the meaning of the moral proved. Now the moral proved, it implies the spirit in human beings and the spirit of morality, and it's sort of discretion between right and wrong and giving right direction in human life, the selection of right path. And this is the crux of writing poem. So writing poetry, again, it is not sort of some compulsion or an imposition. It is natural outcome, an inner urge, and which leads to poetic expression. This must be spontaneous expression, and it is reminiscent of William Wordsworth's famous definition of poetry. Poetry is spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. And it also reminds us Matthew Arnold's, when he points out in his study of poetry that poetry sustains and strengthens us. So this is the positive aspect of human life. And see, all the solutions, all different kind of problems can be solved through this creative experience. Yeah, so this is very, very emphatic expression made by Nissim Askil here. So entire poem can be encapsulated in these two phrases, mind you, students. So this is the moral proved, justification of writing poetry if the poet, he has an inner urge to express herself in himself. So this is, what is it? It is divine inspiration. Even it is also reminiscent of say Coleridge's poem Kubla Khan, when he also mentions divine inspiration that leads to composition of poem. So we have all these poets, famous poets, they have also reiterated the importance of composition of poetry. And what are important points? This is divine inspiration. The poet, he has innermost feeling, and he has got remarkable imaginative vision and tremendous, say, or extraordinary sensibility and sensitivity. So these points, the implied meaning is that we have inference. So at this level, at MA final students, so you must have say deeper understanding. Again, I would like to point out this. Now the best way of understanding, comprehending the second stanza, yes, through the images. And it's a very interesting way of understanding a poem, or rather, you have in-depth study of this poem. So through these seven images. Now, what are these seven images? The poet, he has pointed out here in this say, in which he points out, say, the first deserted plain, and then he say the river flow, the silence near the source. So, and the by a shore, remote and thorny, heart's dark floor. So why the poet, he has pointed out it, why he has depicted it. So, and these seven, and we have kinesthetic and kaleidoscopic pictures. When the poet, he has mentioned the movement, now the slow movement, very significant aspect here, the slow movement. And see, in the slow movement, it results in, yes, positive dynamism. See, now again, think of all these three tasks, through the technique of parallelism. The poet has here depicted the significance of writing poetry, love making, and bird watching. Now, the slow movement, and the slow movement, it seems, yes, somehow to say much more. And see, much more here, it implies a multi-dimensional aspect of writing poetry. Now, in the poet, he again, he depicts the watch. Now, in the see the act of bird watching and the rarer birds. Now, in these images, what is necessary here? The poet, he has pointed out that you have to go to deserted lane. Now we have metaphor of this deserted lane, and see, in particularly in the second act, bird watching, it's fine. You are supposed to go to some deserted, outskirts and remote areas and isolated places, lonely places, just to watch bird, the movements and the in-depth study, chirping of birds, fluttering of wings, and building nest, and different activities of birds. Woodpecker, sparrow, we have peacock, kingfisher. I mean, so many birds, ostrich. So these, various birds. And another point is that, so what are these images? Yes, deserted plain and river flow, and silence in a calm and quiet atmosphere is a must. Calm and quiet atmosphere. Why? What is it? Because you require much concentration for that. See, in the beginning, I have mentioned very important idea, that metaphor of research in this entire poem. You have to, when you undertake some research work, enterprise, as I also mentioned that poem, another poem composed by Nizam Eskil. And what was the title of that poem? Enterprise. So it requires much concentration to get success. And so slow movement, when the poet in the beginning of this second stanza, it implies what? Yes, the reward, the positive result. And slow movement of bird, see, in the beginning, when the bird watcher goes to bird, she is quite hesitant, and immediately she moves and flies. But later on, see the in which reciprocal relationship, affinity they develop, and that is really a must. So slowly she observes, and she would not move immediately, and that is very, very important and beneficial to the bird watcher, and even in lovemaking. Now, in lovemaking, see metaphor of a deserted lanes. It's in which, and yeah, the poet he has mentioned the word remote areas, which is unexplored. The idea underlying is that unknown, unexplored, even in the beloved, her nature, temperament, it is naturally not known in the beginning, and it takes much more time, making efforts, and so hard work. It implies hard work. One, you have to remote and thorny, like, and thorny here, when he has mentioned the word remote and thorny, it implies what it signifies: struggle and hard work. And you have to, in love making also, you have to wait, and know each other, and the expectations and aspirations, and say the way of living. I mean, so many aspects are there. Understanding between the two in love making, and see these remote areas. So the poet, he has used the images for all the three, and obviously remote and thorny area, when the poet talks about, yes, for poetry. Now, what is the meaning here? Try to comprehend. It's not that poet, he or she is supposed to go to certain place. Remote means, yes, try to understand the conscious level of human mind. Conscious level, subconscious level. So all the ideas click into mind. The poet tends to store them, accumulate them, and then spontaneously expresses. So this is, remote and thorny. Thorny, obviously, we have metaphor of this thorn, struggle and hardships, human life. You have to be very hardworking, and it requires much concentration, calm and quiet atmosphere, and you have to devote much time, yes, for that. So here, the same words, images, try to comprehend again, I would say, but in different meaning, different dimensions, different way of understanding. So here, remote and thorny, these words, these images, when we talk about writing poem, it is used for poet's psyche. Yes, each and every human being, he or she has some psyche, in which we have different ideas, and storing the, say, ideologies, and clicking several times, it, when you sometimes study deeply. So in this particular point, it requires time as well as some kind of, say, diligence, perseverance, when he talks about the, Nissim Askel here. Now, the poet, he has used the image of, say, heart's dark floor. Okay, heart's dark floor, especially in love making, when the poet talks about love, unexplored, which is not known. That's why he has pointed out the word dark floor. See the image I have here, mentioned for your better understanding. So dark floor. But when we talk about writing poem, it's again, see the combination of mind, heart, brain, and it formulates human psyche, the conscious level of human mind, and that conscious level that leads to, yes, moral proved and spirit moved. So the poet, he is not confined to just physical level or sensual level, or material level. It is, the dimension, spiritual dimension of the poem is also very important here. So, and for that, this spirituality is a must when you want to write some good poem. So this, see the combination of, we have combination of abstract and concrete ideas. And see, here when we talk about, yes, again it is an expedition, journey, exploration. So this is an expedition from darkness to illumination. Now another important points that we would discuss here when the poet. Yeah, now I would like to say quote his another poem. And at this level, students, you should have idea about the poems. Now in this poem philosophy, the poet, now three companies, do you remember? It's a very important question. And that the poet Nisa Maskell, he earlier I have mentioned this, that he has passion for philosophy and poetry, and he has three companions, rather, three companions, 3P: philosophy, poetry, and poverty. So the element of empathy, when we talk about poverty, empathizing others and all that. Now in this poem philosophy, see, this we have these two similarity in these two poems. I mean philosophy, obviously, and the poet, when he talks about his say his opinion about the domain of philosophy, so at that time he makes comparison, and he tends to justify what, tends to justify the superiority of poetry over philosophy. We'll continue the point.